160 seconds today.
I know, moving away from the basics of motivation.
Hello and welcome to the Urban Vitality Show. Today we are lucky enough to have Rachel Lawrence with us. She's a Chiswick-based Pilates instructor and we're going to be talking about Performance Pilates. Rachel, thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Lovely to have you here. Before we do talk about Performance Pilates, and we will explain what that is, can you just, I know you're based in Chiswick, but what is your kind of, how did you get into health and fitness and how did you get into Pilates in the first place?
Well, it's a very long story, so I'll keep it very, very short.
Okay.
But essentially, I was originally a dancer, so I trained as a dancer from the age of 3. I did ballet, I also did a lot of gymnastics. So I've been sporty all my life. And the long story short is that I had an injury when I was a professional dancer, which tore my meniscus. So I tore my knee, basically, which meant I couldn't dance anymore. And I just thought, well, that was it. That's the end of my career. I'm not going to do anything ever again. Won't be able to go to dance class, won't be able to run, won't be able to do all those things that I love. And sometime later, I was lucky enough, I'd gone into another career, but I met a chiropractor who recommended that I think about trying Pilates to help rehab my various injuries. At that time I had a lower back issue and I had obviously my knee problem. So I hadn't really heard of it, didn't really know anything about it, and thought, well, I'll give it a go, and you never know, it's worth trying these things, isn't it? So I tried it, and literally from the very first class, the minute I started doing it, I absolutely loved it. And I think part of that is being a dancer. There is a technique, it is a discipline, you do have to get into it, you do have to learn the ropes, you can't just sort of fling your arms and legs about, you've really got to understand your body, understand what you're doing, and you learn that through the process of going through the classes. So yeah, I got into it and I practiced it, I think, for about 10 years. And then I thought, well, I really love this, you know, I'm moving really well. In the meantime, I think it was about 4 months of practice. And then I was able to dance again and go back to ballet class.
So you got over your meniscus tear?
Yeah, and that, I can tell you, was such a major thing.
Yeah,
As you can imagine, anyone who's a sports person who's been injured, it's devastating if you can't move like you used to. So that to me was the trigger. It's like, well, there really is something to this Pilates. I'm going to keep going. So yes, I did it for about 10 years as a client, maybe 3-4 times a week. And then I decided, well, you know, I love this. I want to make it my job. So I went on the internet, researched as many places as I could to find Pilates training. And I found an organisation out in California who, for me, seemed to be the most forward-thinking in terms of scientific innovation in movement, biomechanics of movement, you know, functioning of the body and so on. Yeah. And so I applied to see if I was eligible to go and had to go jump through lots and lots of hoops. And eventually I got to do the training course, so I went out to Los Angeles, I did all my training out there. I did not only the training, but you also, my level that I've got of training is I'm certificated. So that means I've trained and qualified, but I've also been certified to teach. This means I've been supervised and done over 400 hours in professional studios with other people. So I knew my stuff when I came back to the UK. And then, I set up here in Chiswick a few years ago.
Cool. So basically, we met a couple of weeks ago and we were talking, and there's lots of different approaches to Pilates and stuff like that, and I was really impressed with the professionalism that you bring to it, but also with your story, the fact that with a meniscus tear, I know, having looked at clients who have had that injury, it affects confidence, and any injury you've had, when you go back into sport, your biggest concern is this going to happen again? And will I ever be as strong as I used to be? And hearing about your story with your meniscus and the fact you went back into dancing, which is a very demanding, activity, and you would have been doing it at a fairly high level anyway, so you're going back into that. And I just love the fact that you were so passionate about helping people get back to what they were doing. And that's, I guess, this whole Performance Pilates concept is actually using Pilates rather than just getting back to average, actually getting back to being able to perform and do what you used to do before. Is that kind of making sense?
Pilates it's one of those things, I suppose, if you're someone who's been very athletic, as I had, I've always done movement, I was always very good at it, so I understand how awful it is when you get an injury and you can't do that thing that you love. It could be running, cycling, you know, high jump, basketball, it could be anything, golf, you know, football, whatever. And so from that point of view, I understand that, and that's where the passion came from, because I was able to rehabilitate myself. Now, I mean, I haven't fixed my knee, but there's nothing I can't do with this knee now, and that's because I've taken the time to do the Pilates, to do the exercises that will rehabilitate it. So the way I kind of look at Pilates is that it's something that you can do for the sake of it, just to do it and enjoy it. But the key thing is that it's a way of conditioning your body to do the things that you love. Right. You know, so if you look at most people out there, I mean, a lot of professional sports people, it's kind of been documented quite a lot, especially this year. Lots of well-known sports people do Pilates as part of their body conditioning routine. I mean, in America, across the board, most American football teams now undertake some kind of Pilates as part of their cross-training. Right. Over here, we've got a couple of rugby teams that do it. You know, well-known golfers like Tiger Woods do it, tennis players like Andy Murray do it, and a lot of them do it to condition, but they also do it when they've been injured, because it's a way of moving and getting the body working again.
Okay, so if we go into specifics, let's say I get a lot of people who possibly put on weight because they've had an injury, and then because they can't play football or they can't play tennis, they don't do anything. And then they put on the weight, and then they come to me and they say, well, I want to drop a kilo size in 21 days. I want to do that, but I have got this knee injury. And what we will do is we will teach them how to squat properly, stuff like that. Yeah. But actually, I will always say we're not a rehab program. We are a lifestyle program to get you that result. But for someone like that, who will always be a little bit nervous, let's say, for example, let's start with the knee injuries. How would you go about helping someone, and what kind of tips and techniques would you say to kind of help them build that strength in that knee again?
Well, there's lots of things you take into consideration. So if someone's to come to see me, and obviously this will depend on whether they're coming into a group class situation where they're going to be training with other people, or whether they're going to come and see me one-to-one. So that can make a difference as well. But for example, if they will come to see me on a one-to-one basis with an injury, let's say a knee injury, the things that you take into account are, first of all, I want to know how the injury happened, because that will give you some idea possibly of why it happened in the first place. Sometimes it can be an acute thing, you know, they were playing rugby, they got tackled the wrong way, and somebody, you know, fell on their knee, etc. And you know, you can understand that. Sometimes it can be that something that they're doing posturally, or they have some habit, has created that problem in the first place. Okay. So there are, you know, for example, say somebody that runs, it might be that their feet are slightly turning out or turning in, so we call this pronating or supinating. Now, if their feet are slightly turning in, that's going to pull up all the way through your leg into the knee, and that's going to cause a problem there. So I'm going to be looking not just at the knee, but where the knee is aligned to the ankle, where it is aligned to the hip, and then giving them very specific exercises to focus on that knee tracking correctly. So, for example, when you're working with your guys, I'm sure when you'll teach them how to squat, like you say, you're going to teach them to do it the right way, and you're looking at where their knees are in relation to their hip bones, in relation to their feet. Well, we do very similar things in Pilates, but what we do is we do it in a very focused, fairly intense way, so that the person is able to start to understand up here what down there is doing. So when, say, someone is running in football and they're running for the goal, they are not at any point able to think about what their body's doing. They're just doing it, and then they shoot and there they go. Whereas what we do in Pilates is we're going to teach them how to understand the alignment of their body. Now, they're not going to think about that when they're playing football, but through repeated training, their body has assimilated that information, and so they are going to be able to do it better.
So you're basically consciously teaching better patterns, so that when they go into that sporting environment.
I always call it mind over muscles.
Okay.
It's mind mastering the muscles.
Right.
So understanding. So for example, there's lots of sports that we call one-handed. So where you're stronger down one side of the body. So if you're a tennis player and you're right-handed, this is your strong side, your right side. Your left side's not going to be anywhere near as strong. This side's going to be very dominant. And so if you have an injury, that's going to cause a lot of issues. So someone like that coming to me, I'm going to be working their whole body, but I'm going to be also emphasising building up the other side so it's equally as strong.
So
and of course, the benefits of that are endurance. You know, you get a lot better endurance through the matches or through whatever they're doing. It's also range of motion, all those sorts of things.
So I suppose with a physio, they would assess, diagnose, and then give some rehab exercise. I suppose with you, you're doing a similar thing, but when you give those rehab exercise, the actual practice of the rehab exercise is very, very conscious.
It is very conscious.
It's almost like a kind of program.
We tend to integrate, certainly the way I work and the way I was trained in Los Angeles is to integrate movement patterns. So, for example, what physios are great at is they'll target exactly the area that needs to move, and they say, right, you need to do so many of these exercises, and that is absolutely vital and very important for the person to do. Where I come in is normally after the acute injury. I'll follow on, and often I'll work with physios as well as the person's got past that acute problem and is now into the point where they need to rehabilitate. And I'll not only work through those exercises, but I'll get them to work into a movement pattern. So to give you an example, it could be something like, say someone who is a golfer, and they've hurt their back. And so I'll be giving them an exercise. And obviously, golf, you're always working one way, you're striking and you're powering through, okay? So I'll be giving them exercises where they're doing similar movements with resistance, but in a very controlled fashion. So the body and the nerves, everything is learning how to move again in that way, but to do it in a controlled fashion so it doesn't injure that area, so it doesn't exacerbate that injury.
So it's a kind of... rather than they say practice makes perfect, you go perfect practice makes perfect.
Yes.
So focusing on that.
Technique is what I always say. You know, if you think of, I suppose it applies to all sport, doesn't it? If you want to be a really good golfer, you've got to work on that technique to make sure you do get those great shots. Same with football or rugby or anything else. Pilates is the same. The more you focus on the technique, and I think this is where people don't quite get it, that is what it's all about, because the more you focus on it, the more you start to understand how your body moves and what your body's little habits are, the more you're going to avoid getting that injury again.
Absolutely. I mean, for example, Tiger Woods at the moment, who's got his back injury.
Yeah.
One of the
He'll
things
do Pilates. He's a regular Pilates person.
Yeah, but he will have to go back and relearn to, unlearn some of those habits that possibly putting him in a less, a less strong, a weaker position when he's striking the ball. So, but it's interesting. And it's always interesting because I think a lot of people go to a physio, they get given their rehab exercises, and they're like, well, maybe they'll do them, maybe they won't. But generally, if they do them, then probably not doing them with the level of concentration you need to do them to unlearn that pattern that probably will have made you broken in the first place. That's
a really good point, because and also those people that even do them and work really hard at them, the beauty of Pilates is that you've got the professional eye watching you do it. So I can look at somebody moving and I can say, oh, you just need to just bring that rib in a little bit, then you're not going to feel that pain in your back, or just drop your shoulder down while you do that movement.
Great.
Because they're not aware they're doing it, they're doing their best, but they can't see themselves. And that's a big thing. It's in Pilates we're trained to have an eye on everything, so you can see if someone's shoulders are uneven, if they're walking maybe a little bit more on their left foot than their right, but there's all sorts of things that go into it. And even if someone is in a situation where they can't afford to do private lessons, they come to a group class, the way we teach Pilates is we have small groups. So in my group class, I'm walking around and I know everyone's injury because they filled in their form. I know who's got what, and I'll be walking around and what I call tweaking, just doing little movements, manipulations, just to teach their body No, you need to be there when you do that. Then you're not going to feel that discomfort, for example.
And that's because I have a lot of boot camps. So I think people, they lose hope if they have had a niggling injury.
Yeah.
And they go to the physio, and they go into the physio once or twice a week. But to a certain degree, physios do a fantastic job, as does massage therapists, stuff like that. But if your movement pattern is kind of compromised, then that problem will probably come back. And actually, a boot camp, what we do is we specialise in helping people drop a clothes size in 21 days. Yeah. Now, through that process, you're learning things about your body, and you may get to a stage where if there's a niggling injury, we're not a rehab program, and that's why we love working with being able to refer people to people like you, so they can just magnify in a one particular movement pattern and get that right, so that that can give them hope that they can get over this injury and come back as strong, if not stronger than they were before. Because I think especially as people get older, sometimes they kind of think, oh well, it'll never be 100% again. And
well, I think that's one of the issues now. I do see it a lot in my classes, is that obviously when you're very young, you can be injured and your body will bounce back like that. Now, when you get past 30 even, it doesn't happen like that. That's why all the sports people are so young. You know, it's like in my dance career, you know, you generally have to think about retiring at about 28 because your body just can't do that level. But what is really key, and I can't stress this enough because I've seen it over and over again, is when people do come to Pilates and they commit to doing it once a week as part of a conditioning routine, it really, really does make a difference, because they slowly start to learn what's going on in their body. They start to be more aware of their body. And that's a key thing, you know, being aware of what your body's doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And eventually, and obviously I'm going to give them exercises to make that injury or the muscles around the injury, which is what you generally do, is make the muscles around the injury stronger. And eventually what will happen is, if they're consistent, they will suddenly realise one day that, oh, I woke up this morning, I didn't have any backache. I mean, I get this all the time. People don't quite get it straight away. And then they'll say to me 6 months down the line, my back doesn't hurt anymore. I only realised that the other day. Or, you know, I was lifted something off the top shelf and I was balancing on my feet and my ankle didn't go, and that's the first time that's happened. You know, it is a consistent form of exercise. It's something you need to do regularly. And I think that's something that people don't quite yet understand. You know, when you say about a physio, it's like, yeah, they'll go to a physio and the physio will say, this is what you need to do. And that's great. But it's consistently conditioning your body to support it so it can do all those other things. That's the key. And that's where I think Pilates comes in. You know, I don't preach it to people as in, oh, you must do Pilates and nothing else, because I don't believe that, because I love all sorts of activities. But I haven't done anything else that has kept my body in such a good condition and injury-free.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, other things that I was thinking would be useful for you, because you probably have lots of people that run with you, is that runners can get lots of injuries, and often people who are very, very fit and do an activity like, say, running or cycling, their muscles are really tight, really, really tight. And of course, the tighter the muscle, the more susceptible that muscle is to injury. So in Pilates, what we do is we strengthen muscles, but we also stretch them. So it's strength and flexibility. Okay. So the muscles get more elongated, and therefore they're less prone to getting a tear when there's a sudden movement. Great. You know, so that's the other thing that's very beneficial about it.
Brilliant. Well, look, that's been fantastic, Rachel. And you've given, I think the main thing is giving people hope, because they run out of options. They go to the usual physio, invest money in that. They're not getting the result they really want. And with just a little bit more focus on some of these things, in accompaniment with other things or whatever, you can get a result. So that would be great. If people are interested in finding out more about you, Rachel, so you've got a website, and what's your website?
So my website is rachellawrencepilates.com, so www.rachellawrencepilates.com, and there's lots of information on there. There's all about what I do, where I trained, my timetable, my classes, and if anyone's got a question, as I always say, then just email me. My email details are on there as well. I'm always happy to talk to people. I always get emails saying, oh, I've just had this happen, what should I do? You know, I'm happy to talk, because that's what I do, that's my passion. And the one thing I would say say is there is always hope. No matter what's happened, there is always hope. You know, you've got to just give it a go.
That's brilliant, Rachel. Thank you very much. We'll probably sort out a workshop as well for the boot camps as well. So we'll sort
that would be great.
No worries, Rachel. Thanks for your time.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.